I'm very interested in what you're doing in the diabetes space. You mentioned your interest in convergence of technologies and bringing that to bear on specific conditions. And J&J has got a very interesting portfolio of medical devices and pharmaceutical interventions to treat diabetes. And then when you converge that as well with your expertise in health, well-being, and behavior change on the preventative side, you actually find you've got some quite interesting opportunity to add value in this space. And I note your investment up in Inverness to really provide a center of excellence on that.
Yeah, you know, diabetes, as I mentioned earlier, is clearly one of the major challenges we're going to have over the next several decades when you look at the rates of obesity and type 2 diabetes and metabolic disease that we face. And at J&J, we think it's going to take a multifaceted approach to going after it. Frankly, that we're going to touch all areas. So clearly we're involved in devices with test strips, some of the work that we have going on in Inverness. How do we make those much easier, much more patient-centric? How do we get better connected? How are we able to analyze that information over time? Those are all areas that we're looking very hard at. Our pharmaceutical group, I think, is on the cusp with looking at new approaches. We're very hopeful that we'll have a drug approved in the coming year, canagliflozin, which is a new approach for type 2 diabetes. And obviously we're looking even on our consumer side, as I mentioned earlier, with some of our consumer programs around how can we use health and wellness. I think that the challenge is how do we bring that together in a more comprehensive offering? Because I think that's what patients are ultimately going to look for, is not just a pill, not just a test strip, not just another program, but how can you bring something that's more broadly integrated that's going to provide, I think, a much more wholesome solution for them. So those are some of the things that we're thinking about.
Yeah, totally. And I think behavior change is quite a key component of that.
Yes.
And I'd really like to extend an offer of collaborating on that agenda.
Thank you. Next question. We've got one up there. Straight up.
Yes, I'm Jerry Brown. I'm chairman of a private equity investment group in healthcare. I think you've spoken very eloquently about the opportunities in healthcare. Why do you think it is then that so many pharma companies are finding it difficult to persuade their investors to invest more money in their businesses and instead requiring them to give money back?
Well, I certainly won't and can't make a broad sweeping statement for the entire pharma industry. But I think what we have found is that continuing to invest in a thoughtful, deliberate way over time, particularly around pharmaceutical development, is absolutely critical for patients and for our business. And what you've seen, much to what I was saying earlier, is the pharma industry has gone through a transition whereby many of the diseases that we're going after, frankly, are much more complex than what we saw in the 80s, 90s. R&D productivity has been greatly challenged over the last several years. We've seen a lot of changes in the commercial model at the same time. And we continue to believe that by bringing together the best scientific minds, by building the right collaborations, that we can still make a tremendous difference in so many of these areas. So I'm hopeful that over time, and by the way, some of the investments that you make in the pharmaceutical side, you may not see the result of for 10, 15, 17 years. And I think a lot of investor time horizons have changed. They've looked at other areas. But I still believe that the fundamentals of the pharmaceutical industry are strong for all the reasons I mentioned earlier. And I certainly think it's going to be necessary for us to solve some of these major health issues that we're facing. Thank you. Another question. Yes, we'll go here and then over here.
Ping Shek from Pharma Ventures, based in Oxford. The question I have is really relating to how does Johnson & Johnson think about penetrating the emerging markets and building up its business franchise there? Just as an example, I'm currently working for two clients, one involved in advanced wound management and the other one in infection control, I think hydrogen peroxide sterilization. And the thing that strikes me in working for these two particular clients is that the cost structure in emerging markets is very different, and the products which my clients are very successful at selling into emerging markets is primarily a function of features and price. But price is very important. So just as an example in infection control is that my clients' machines are substantially cheaper than a Johnson & Johnson machine, and where the performance characteristics are not so bad that basically hospitals sort of wouldn't consider this type of machine, despite the lack of track record, branding, and other things. And so just quite interesting to see how companies such as Johnson & Johnson think about penetrating or even collaborating with local partners. Just get a sense of sort of the thinking on penetrating the emerging markets.
Sure. Well, we think it's a very important opportunity for us. And what I would say is that you're absolutely right. I think for many years, particularly if I take, for example, our medical device division, what you saw us doing is playing mostly in the premium segment in a lot of the emerging markets. But clearly our focus now is to change that model to be able to reach many more patients. Well, that starts with understanding the unmet medical need in a particular area. An unmet medical need in an emerging market may be somewhat different than what you have in developed markets. And so a big focus of ours has been putting local R&D teams on the ground in those areas, making sure that we understand the medical need where we can have the biggest impact. We think sometimes it's taking complex procedures and simplifying them. Taking devices and making sure that they're sized right, that they're considered right for the forum where they'll be used in an emerging market versus a developed market. Trying to have local manufacturing capabilities and capacity, and then ultimately having the right commercial model to bring that to bear versus the model that I think we have historically used. Now for our pharmaceutical group, it's different. There, it relies more on approach of some of our over-the-counter brands along with some of our RX brands. In our consumer, we've actually had a pretty good print. But overall, we think emerging markets are absolutely essential, and it will involve much more than just staying focused on the high end of the market. Okay, thank you. I think there was one other one over here. Probably got time for about one or two more, I'm told.
Yeah, my name is Michael Terberg. I chair the commercial board at Liverpool University. I'm just wondering more about your engagement with universities and your commercial model.
In what way?
Well, to understand, as things move forward, universities have been fairly poor at negotiating deals with large pharmaceutical companies. Some are better than others. And that's worked, fine. But in terms of engaging the level of activity that you would seek, the innovation you would seek in universities, my view is that there has to be more on the table to innovate, to create that innovation. Otherwise, it's sometimes quite a lackadaisical relationship. And I was wondering how, in terms of the challenge that you face in finding new technologies, how you are seeking to galvanize that and engage in a commercial way with universities.
Sure. I mean, one of the ways that we were talking about is opening our innovation centers that we just recently announced. To the gentleman's earlier question, what we have seen is the VC funds have moved away from this field in a certain way because of the higher risk and a number of other factors. And so we certainly feel that expanding our relationships with academic centers, with institutions, with other people starting in the venture world requires a presence and a relationship that's built over time. I think there's clearly a lot of challenges. There's challenges around IP. There's challenges around the exact financial constructs. And what we're hoping to do is by providing local networks, okay, here in London, in China, in a few areas where we're starting out, that we'll have a much greater intimacy with those ecosystems in that particular area that we can build on later. So we think there's a tremendous opportunity there. But it is going to take different types of thinking on the part of the academic institution. wrestling with some of the issues that they're faced with, as well as different thinking on our part as well. Okay, thank you. One more? Why don't we go right here? It's somebody down here. What's that? Okay, everybody in here wants to hear it.
Good evening.
Good
My
evening.
question to you is about obesity. How would you, like I have my NGO, I work for women and children and in India and African countries. How would you work on that? Have you have plans for that?
We certainly don't have all the answers on obesity. As you know, it's a multifaceted, very, very challenging issue. And right now, what we're trying to do is scientifically truly understand the disease. The second thing that we're doing in some of our wellness programs, these have been predominantly in the United States today, where we're trying to work with some technology companies to come up with some very simple movement programs that have been shown to be used in schools, that they integrate into part of the daily activities rather than just as a separate, but into the actual learning modules. So we're using that approach there. We're, in other areas of our business, we're looking at it. We even look at it in our surgical area, for example. But we don't have what I'd call a comprehensive effort yet in third world countries around that particular condition. But I think that that's something that we're clearly going to be focused on for the future, because we're seeing that hit developing countries more and more.
Yeah, I would request you to look to the cost also.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much. You guys have been a great audience, and I wish you a great rest of the conference. Bye now.